He told his wife to move out before he got back. He said another woman deserved her home more than she ever did.
He told his wife to move out before he got back. He said another woman deserved her home more than she ever did. But while he was sipping champagne on a beach with his lover, his wife was signing papers that would change everything. When he returned, confident and laughing, his key didn't work, and what happened next destroyed the life he thought he controlled. Before we begin, please subscribe and turn on notifications. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're about strength, survival, and justice. Stay with us, because this ending rewrites everything. Emily learned early that silence could be a shield. Not the peaceful kind. The heavy, aching silence that fills a room after a cruel remark. After a sigh meant to remind her she was never quite enough. Her marriage didn't begin this way. Once, her husband's voice had been warm, his touch familiar. But slowly, love was replaced with correction. Why can't you do anything right? Don't talk so much. You embarrass me. The words weren't shouted. They were delivered calmly, which somehow made them hurt more. Emily adapted the way survivors often do. She listened more than she spoke. She apologized even when she wasn't wrong. She learned how to shrink herself to fit the narrow space he allowed her. Every decision had to be approved, every opinion questioned, every mistake, real or imagined, used as proof that she needed guidance. And he enjoyed it. His arrogance grew with every quiet victory. He spoke over her at dinners, corrected her in front of guests, laughed when she hesitated, as if her uncertainty was entertainment. Friends noticed Emily fading. Her laughter became rare. Her eyes avoided mirrors. Inside, she still dreamed of independence, of peace, of being seen. But dreams felt dangerous when spoken aloud. So she stayed silent to survive. When no one noticed, not even her husband, was that silence was not surrender. It was observation. While he believed he was in control, Emily was learning something far more powerful. How to endure, how to wait, how to plan quietly. Because silence, when chosen, not forced, can become preparation. And one day soon, that quiet woman he underestimated would make a decision so final, so irreversible, that his voice would no longer matter at all. But for now, Emily said nothing, and that silence was the beginning of everything. Emily wasn't trying to listen. She was halfway down the hallway, laundry basket balanced against her hip, when she heard Mark's voice drift from the study. The door was slightly open. His tone was light, almost playful, the way it used to be when he talked to her years ago. She paused, not because she was curious, because something in his voice didn't belong to her anymore. "She's comfortable," Mark said, lowering his voice. "Too comfortable." Emily stood still. The basket slipped slightly in her hands, but she didn't notice. Her heart had already begun to pound, slow and heavy, like a warning drum. "I mean, come on," he continued, a soft laugh following. Emily's replaceable. The word landed like glass. Replaceable. Emily's fingers tightened around the basket until her knuckles burned. She told herself she must have misheard. People didn't talk about their wives like that. Not casually, not with amusement. But Mark kept going. "I've outgrown this life," he said. "Same house, same routine, same woman. I'm ready for an upgrade." Upgrade, as if she were an old phone. A worn-out couch. Something to discard once a shinier version appeared. Emily leaned against the wall, her breath shallow now, her chest tight. She felt strangely detached, as if she were watching someone else's life collapse from a distance. On the other end of the call, someone laughed. A woman. Emily didn't hear her words clearly, but the tone was unmistakable. Familiar. Intimate. Mark softened his voice. "Yeah, the trip next week will be perfect. No distractions. Just us. Trip. Business trip. That's what he'd called it at dinner the night before. He'd barely looked up from his plate when he mentioned it. 3 days. Maybe 4. Conferences. Meetings. Emily had nodded silently, like always. Now the pieces began to rearrange themselves in her mind, forming a picture she didn't want to see. "She doesn't suspect a thing," Mark said. "Emily lives in her own little world. As long as the bills are paid and the house is standing, she's fine. Emily felt something crack. Not loudly, not all at once, but deep inside, where numbness had protected her for years. This wasn't anger yet. It wasn't tears. It was clarity. For a long time, Emily had told herself this marriage was going through a rough phase. Stress, work pressure, miscommunication. She blamed herself, as she had been trained to do. If I were better, he'd be kinder. If I were quieter, he'd stay. If I tried harder, this would pass. But standing in that hallway, listening to the man she had built her life around casually plan a future without her, Emily understood something with chilling certainty. This wasn't a phase. This was the end. Mark laughed again, his chair creaking as he leaned back. By the time I get back, things will be different, he said. One way or another. Emily stepped back before the floor betrayed her. She moved slowly, deliberately, until she reached the bedroom and closed the door without a sound. Only then did her knees give out. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the familiar walls, the ones she'd painted, the curtains she'd chosen, the life she'd maintained like a caretaker rather than a partner. Her hands trembled, not because she felt weak, but because something long suppressed was waking up. She replayed the conversation again and again, each word carving deeper meaning. Replaceable. Upgrade. No suspicion. He had underestimated her so completely that he didn't even bother to hide. Emily stood and walked to the closet. She pulled out his suitcase, still dusty from the last conference. A faint scent lingered, sweet, unfamiliar perfume buried beneath detergent. She hadn't wanted to notice it before. Now she couldn't ignore it. That night at dinner, Mark was unusually cheerful. He talked about airport lounges, about how exhausting travel was, about how lucky Emily was to have such a driven husband. She smiled politely and said nothing. Silence had always been her armor. But this time, it wasn't protecting her. It was sharpening her. When Mark went to bed early, Emily stayed up. She opened her laptop, not to search for proof, not to beg for answers, but to look at documents she hadn't touched in years. The house. Her house. The one she'd inherited before the marriage. The one she'd insisted remain in her name, when Mark had laughed and called her paranoid. You worry too much, he'd said back then. Emily almost smiled at the memory. As Mark slept peacefully down the hall, dreaming of beaches and stolen mornings, Emily sat in the quiet glow of the screen, reading, calculating, remembering who she had been before silence took her voice. The betrayal hurt. But worse than the affair was the certainty that he believed she would never fight back. That belief, that arrogance, would soon become his greatest mistake. And as Emily closed the laptop, her reflection staring back at her from the darkened screen, one thought settled firmly in her mind. If he was leaving this life behind, she would make sure he had nowhere to return to. The truth didn't arrive dramatically. It didn't announce itself with shouting or tears. It appeared quietly, in an email notification Emily almost deleted. She was clearing Mark's inbox on the shared tablet, something he had once insisted she do to stay useful. Most messages were boring. Confirmations, invoices, loyalty programs. Then she saw it. Flight itinerary. 2 passengers confirmed. Emily frowned. 2. Her fingers hovered for a moment before she tapped the email open. The screen filled with details that felt unreal at first. A tropical destination, oceanfront resort, return dates carefully aligned with his business trip. 2 tickets, 1 hotel room, no conference, no meetings. And next to Mark's name was another. A woman she didn't recognize. Emily didn't cry. She didn't gasp or drop the tablet. Instead, her body went very still like a lake before a storm. This wasn't suspicion anymore. This wasn't emotional intuition. This was evidence. The lie, fully exposed. She scrolled further, reading booking notes, special requests, champagne on arrival, sunset dinner reservations. Mark hadn't planned something this thoughtful for her in years. Something twisted in her chest, but it wasn't jealousy. It was grief. Not for him, but for the years she had spent shrinking herself for someone who was already gone. Her phone buzzed. A notification from social media. Emily opened it without thinking, and instantly wished she hadn't. There was Mark, smiling, sunglasses on, arm draped casually around a woman whose face glowed with excitement. The caption read, Asterisk, new chapter, new energy. Life's too short to settle. Asterisk. The post had been public. Friends, colleagues, even distant relatives had already begun reacting. Emily stared at the screen, heat flooding her face, not because she was ashamed, but because he hadn't even tried to protect her dignity. He wanted to humiliate her, to rewrite the story before she could speak. Comments poured in. So happy for you. You deserve this, Mark. Living your best life. Not one person asked about Emily. Her phone rang. Mark. She answered. What the hell are you doing? He snapped without greeting. Why are you going through my emails? Emily looked around the living room. The furniture she'd chosen, the wall she'd maintained, the home she'd kept alive while he dismantled her quietly. I saw the tickets, she said calmly. Silence. Then a scoff. So, she repeated softly. It's not a business trip. He laughed, actually laughed. You really want to have this conversation now? I want the truth. The truth. His tone hardened. The truth is, this marriage has been over for a long time. You just refuse to accept it. Emily absorbed the words without flinching. And the post? She asked. You saw that too? He said smugly. Good. Saves me the trouble. There it was. No apology. No explanation. Just entitlement. I'm done pretending, Mark continued. I'm coming back in a few days. I suggest you're gone by then. Emily's hand tightened around the phone. Gone, she repeated. Yes. I need space. You can stay with a friend. Or family. I don't care. Emily almost corrected him. My house, she wanted to say. You're the guest. But she didn't. Not yet. Mark sighed, impatient. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Emily. You were never built for confrontation. The call ended. Emily sat down slowly, the phone still warm in her hand. This was the moment she was supposed to break. The moment movies taught women to collapse into sobs, to beg, to plead for dignity from someone who had none. But something unexpected happened instead. Emily felt calm, not numb, clear. The humiliation had burned away the last traces of denial. There was nothing left to protect, nothing left to save, only decisions to make. She stood and walked into the study, the room Mark had claimed as his space. She opened the filing cabinet he thought she'd forgotten about. Inside were documents she had quietly organized years ago. Property deeds, financial records, the house title, her name, only her name. Emily exhaled slowly. That night, while Mark posted photos of cocktails and sunsets, Emily made one call, then another. By morning, she was sitting in a quiet office across from a woman with sharp eyes and a calm voice. A lawyer. Emily told her everything, not emotionally, not dramatically, but clearly. Dates, evidence, ownership. When she finished, the lawyer leaned back and smiled slightly. You're not as powerless as he thinks, she said. Emily nodded. I know. As she left the office, sunlight warming her face, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in years. Control. Mark believed humiliation would silence her. That fear would drive her out. What he didn't understand, what he never bothered to notice, was that Emily had already survived the worst part. Silence. And now, with the truth laid bare and the law on her side, she was no longer reacting. She was planning. By the time Mark returned from his vacation, from the lie he proudly displayed to the world, he would step into a reality he never imagined, because the woman he thought he could erase had just become the one making every move. Emily didn't confront Mark. That was the first move, and the most important one. While he posted sunlit photos and captions about freedom, Emily moved through the house like a calm presence, touching nothing that didn't belong to her, changing nothing that would alert him. To Mark, silence had always meant obedience. He never imagined it could mean strategy. The lawyer worked quickly. Too quickly, in Mark's opinion, if he had known. The title to the house was clean. No shared ownership. No marital claim strong enough to stop what came next. But as paperwork moved forward, something else surfaced. Have you noticed these withdrawals? The lawyer asked during their second meeting, sliding a folder across the desk. Emily looked down. Her breath caught. Amounts taken out slowly, carefully, over years. Always small enough to go unnoticed. Repairs that never happened. Investments she'd never approved. Her signature, copied. Forged. This is financial abuse, the lawyer said evenly. And this, she tapped one document, is fraud. Emily stared at the page. Memories rearranged themselves in her mind. The way Mark insisted on handling the finances. The way he mocked her questions. The way he said, "You wouldn't understand." She understood now. And strangely, the realization didn't make her angry. It made her focused. Selling the house became not just an escape, but a correction. The listing went up quietly. No signs on the lawn. No social media. A private sale. And then came the buyer. A company representative at first. Polite. Neutral. Efficient. But during the final walkthrough, Emily noticed someone else standing at the edge of the property. A man in a tailored coat, watching the house with careful interest. He didn't speak to her. Didn't approach. Just observed. Something about it sent a ripple through her. Not fear, but curiosity. The lawyer later explained. The buyer prefers discretion. Asset consolidation. Long-term planning. Emily signed the final document with a steady hand. The house was sold. Legally. Cleanly. Irreversibly. Mark was still on vacation. His plans were unraveling in his absence. The first crack appeared when his credit card was declined at a beachfront restaurant. He laughed it off, blaming the bank. Then his phone buzzed with emails. Mortgage account, closed. Property insurance, transferred. Utility services, terminated. Confusion turned to irritation. Irritation turned to panic. He called Emily. Once. Twice. 10 times. She didn't answer. From her temporary apartment. Small, quiet. Hers. Emily watched the messages pile up. What did you do? This isn't funny. Call me now. She never replied. Instead, she forwarded everything to her lawyer. The forged documents triggered audits. The accounts were frozen. Mark's carefully curated life began to stall. That mysterious buyer? Not a coincidence. The company had a history of acquiring properties connected to legal disputes. They noticed patterns others missed. The forged signatures had raised flags. Mark's name began appearing in places he didn't expect. Quiet ones. Professional ones. By the time his vacation ended, Mark wasn't returning to a triumphant new life. He was returning to questions. At the airport, he refreshed his banking app again and again. Error. At home, what he still called home, there was no key that worked. No familiar lights. No door to unlock. Just a notice taped neatly to the front gate. Property transferred. New ownership effective immediately. Asterisk, asterisk. His luggage rolled uselessly behind him. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Mark stood there, stunned, scrolling through his phone, dialing Emily's number with shaking hands. Straight to voicemail. What he didn't know, what he couldn't see, was that Emily was already gone from his reach. Not running. Not hiding. Repositioning. Every step she took was legal. Documented. Quiet. No screaming matches. No public revenge. Just precision. And as Mark's plans collapsed, his affair, his finances, his image, Emily felt something settle inside her. Not triumph. Balance. She hadn't destroyed him. She had simply stopped holding him up. And without her silence cushioning his lies, everything he built began to fall on its own. The quiet power move wasn't the sale. It was this. Emily never once had to explain herself. Because when Mark finally understood what she had done, there was nothing left for him to argue with. Only consequences. And somewhere in the background, unseen, unannounced, the buyer watched, not as a threat, but as proof that Emily's life had moved beyond Mark's shadow. The woman he thought he controlled had rewritten the rules, without ever raising her voice, and the silence that once kept her small had become the force that took everything from him. Mark returned 2 days early, not because he missed home, but because everything was slipping. He arrived with her, the woman from the photos, the upgrade. They rolled their suitcases up the familiar driveway, laughing awkwardly, already rehearsing the story they would tell anyone who asked why Emily was gone. Mark reached the door first. He slid the key in, turned it. Nothing. He frowned and tried again, harder this time. Still nothing. Try the other one, the woman said, irritation creeping into her voice. Mark did. Click. Resistance. The door didn't move. What the hell? he muttered, jiggling the handle like the house itself was misbehaving. Entitlement rose fast, hot and reflexive. "This is my house," he snapped, pulling out his phone. "She can't do this." But before he could dial, the gate behind them opened slowly. Emily stepped inside the property. Calm, composed, unrecognizable from the woman he'd left behind. Mark froze. "There you are," he said sharply. "What game are you playing? Open the door." Emily looked at the locked entrance, then back at him. "I can't," she said simply. His laugh was short and ugly. "Don't be dramatic. Give me the key." "I don't have one." The woman shifted uncomfortably. "Mark, what's going on?" Emily met his eyes, steady, unafraid. "I sold the house." The words landed like a physical blow. Mark stared at her. "You're lying." Emily reached into her bag and handed him a folder. Deed transfer. Sale confirmation. Dates. Signatures. Legal. Final. His hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. "You can't sell my house without my consent." Emily's voice didn't rise. "It was never yours." That was when another car pulled into the driveway. Black, quiet, intentional. A man stepped out, the same one who had watched the property weeks earlier. Alongside him was Emily's lawyer, the buyer. "Mr. Carter," the man said politely to Mark, "you are trespassing on private property." Mark's face drained of color. "This is insane. She forged documents. She's unstable." The lawyer stepped forward. "Actually, Mark, we discovered your forged documents. Financial abuse, unauthorized withdrawals, false signatures." She handed him another set of papers. Mark didn't read them. He didn't have to. The truth was already on his face. The woman beside him took a slow step back. "You said she was nothing," she whispered, "that she wouldn't fight." Emily finally spoke, not to Mark but to her. "He thought silence meant weakness," she said gently. "He was wrong." The buyer nodded once. "Law enforcement has been notified. You'll be contacted regarding the investigation." Mark exploded. "This isn't over," he shouted. "You think you've won?" Emily looked at the door again, the door that would never open for him. "I didn't win," she said. "I got my life back." Neighbors watched openly now. Phones were raised. Whispers spread. Mark stood there, exposed, displaced, stripped of the story he'd tried to sell the world. No house, no control, no audience on his side. The woman picked up her suitcase and walked away without another word. Emily turned to leave as well. Mark called after her, voice cracking. "Emily, wait." She paused, but didn't turn around. "The door didn't open," she said quietly, "because it wasn't yours anymore." Then she walked away. And for the first time in a very long time, Emily didn't need silence to survive. She had truth. She had proof. And the door that once trapped her had finally closed. On him. He thought he erased her, but she rewrote the ending. Emily didn't win by shouting. She won by choosing herself. Sometimes the people you discard are the ones who take everything you thought you owned. If this story moved you, subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who needs to remember their worth. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?